know what some of you are thinking. I'm not psychic, but I know. Some of you are thinking, who's the new guy? Well, you're right and you're wrong. Yeah, I'm new, brand new, and you have no idea how new. But you're wrong if you think I'm new to the church. As a matter of fact, I've been here so long that before the addition was even built, we used to set up these dinners, and me and Dale Sr. and Everett and some of the boys, we'd have to chase everybody out at noon, and then we'd have to break out these big, heavy tables. And I don't mean the plastic ones you can get at Walmart. I mean these big, heavy metal and wood tables. And we'd set them all up, and then we'd bring everybody in, and we'd have dinner. It got so I didn't want to come to dinner anymore. It was so much work. It just turned into a big job all the time. When we decided to build the addition, man, I was all over that. Oh, yes, we need an addition, Lord. Absolutely. And we did. We got this one right over here, and we've been using it ever since. But I'm certainly not new here. I'm also not new to the altar here. My children were married in this church at this altar. My grandbabies were dedicated in this church at this altar. My mom, when she died, her memorial service was here at this altar. And I had a motorcycle gang member with me named Scarecrow who was saved right here at this altar and is still faithful to this day, 10 years ago. So I'm absolutely not new to this altar. But more importantly, this is also where God healed me of a life-threatening illness of hepatitis C after failing 2 years of chemotherapy, after the doctor said there's nothing more we can do. They wanted to bring my wife in and give her grief counseling because it was all over. My liver enzymes were out of the roof. There was nothing anybody could do. It was all over. Right here at this altar. Completely healed one day. Junior Tinkle, Everett, Pastor Travis Sr., a group of guys come up. We prayed here. I walked out. The next day I went to my doctor. They drew the blood. He said, we've obviously got somebody else's blood because it's not that your viral count is down. It's gone. It's completely gone. Now, we had 6 or 7 years of blood tests. There was no way that the viral count, it might go down if you get better, or it might show and not get worse, but it doesn't disappear, not in medicine. But mine did. I was healed. Never have had an incident of it since. Get tested every year, and it's never come back. So this altar is absolutely not new to me. And I hope that by the time we're done talking here today, that you'll understand exactly what that means. Basically what's going on is I've been arrested for murder in the first degree. And I yet have never been better in my adult life. I know that's going to sound strange to some of you. I'm sorry. It's unfortunate you can't experience it if you choose not to understand, but trust me when I say, when the federal government arrested me and charged me with murder of 2 guys just 4 weeks ago, not a year ago, not in my past, 4 weeks ago, I was rolling along doing just fine. I retired from the fire department as a battalion chief. I was doing well, I thought, financially with our lives. I even thought I was doing great with this motorcycle club that me and a brother of mine was running with, because we looked at it like we're doing God's work. We're hanging out with the same guys that Jesus hung out with. Yeah, that's what my mind was telling me. And when these other guys were doing some shady stuff, me and my brother were handing out crosses and talking to them. And it turned into such a big issue that if you had the cross on what we call your colors or your vest with your patches on it, the national president started to throw guys out that were wearing that cross. Then he threw me and my buddy out, David Hartigan. You guys quit handing out those crosses. You got to go. This is a motorcycle gang. Yeah. So we convinced ourselves that what we were doing was right. That we were walking where we needed to walk. That we were listening to God's voice. Let me tell you what had really happened and what brought me here to share this with you today. Now, the examples that I'm going to show or share with you are proof of how God loves absolutely every one of His created children, in spite of their epic failures. My life has been an example of one great, catastrophic, devastating failure after another. Although a lot of folks couldn't see it. If God can redeem me, if He can restore me, if He can love me after the sin that almost devoured me and my family, He will surely restore you and He will surely honor your heart's desires. And that's a promise. Now, let me start out by telling you, I'm not responsible for the murders that I've been charged with. Absolutely not. Had nothing to do with it. They occurred 2 years ago. But I am responsible for 4 other people's deaths. Even God's David only murdered a guy he didn't know. I'm responsible for the death of people I loved dearly. Directly responsible. I'm responsible for my baby brother's death. I'm responsible for my mother's death. I'm responsible for my oldest firstborn son's death. And he died as a police officer serving right here in Ocala. I'm responsible for the death of a guy in the club that trusted me. God doesn't want me to share those failures with you in any detail today, because that's not what this is about. Maybe, God willing, He'll want me to share this some other time with someone or some other group, but that's not what this is about today. Today, God wants to use just this one giant sin that was in my life. The defeat and the collapse and the derailment of my life. That's what He wants me to share with you today. And you know, I couldn't understand why. I'm not Catholic. I had no need to confess to a man or publicly. I didn't want to have to share all this with family and friends. I didn't understand. Like, I thought that me and God had already worked it out. Keeping in mind, now this happened 4 weeks ago. I just couldn't grab onto why I needed to share any of this with any of you today, since me and God were now good. But you're going to find out why. It's His existence to me and anyone willing to listen and watch where this goes that He's going to use this message for you. So the message today is really a challenge. It's to consider what God has to say to you today and how He turned my greatest sin and the derailment of my life into redemption. That's what this is about. I just didn't know why. I didn't understand. Let me start by telling you I was raised in a Christian home. Absolutely. Bible stories and prayers before bed, church on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesdays. I was part of every Royal Rangers, Teen Challenge, Youth for Christ, Christian Service Brigade, quiz teams, youth camps, and retreats that any church had to offer. It was our whole life. It was all part of my raising. You see, my dad was a pastor. And he went from sometimes 2 or 3 families meeting in a home that they would then turn into a church, much like we would turn this into a restaurant after everybody left. Right on up to where he had his own pulpit in the Tuscarora Indian Reservation up in New York. Some of my earliest memories of my whole life are my father on a street corner preaching through a giant antiquated PA system that would screech and squeal at people as they walked by, while all of my siblings and I were handing out tracts on that street corner. I was the oldest of 6 kids. My mother was the oldest of 14. Protestant Irishman, you know. We had a whole gang going, but the way that we were raised in this early part of my life was no TV in the house, no going to movies, no dancing, no card playing. You know, getting the idea? It was that the world and all of its gadgets and entertainment were evil and from the devil. I remember a sermon my dad did one time on how evil Walt Disney was and why we shouldn't be going to Disneyland. I remember it, and I think I was 7 at the time. All us kids were required to go door to door and hand out tracts and invite people to my dad's church every day after school. That's what we did. Because again, there was no TV. This is how our life was. As I entered my teen years, I was on the fast track for the theology degree from either Wheaton or Bethel or Robert Wesleyan. Was offered scholarships by all 3. Full paid scholarships. Just had to complete the rest of my high school, and off and running I was going. I was ready and set up for life and ministry. I'd been prepared for it. I'd been given the gifts for it. I'd been raised to understand it. And I was ready to go. And then something very, very profound happened in my life and me and my family. We found out that my father was a phony. We found out that my dad, the preacher, the born-again guy, had been living a secret, dark life. It all came crashing down as I entered my teen years when he impregnated the church secretary and she showed up at our door. He never stepped in the pulpit again after that. And as my dad then started to fall away, I started to question everything that I'd been raised as. What's going on? What happened? Man, are you telling me none of it's real? It was unbelievable. And then my dad started hanging out with mobsters and gangsters in Rochester, New York. As my dad turned away from God, so did I. I was 17 in high school, bouncing in a topless bar that you had to be 21 to get in. And my father was proud of me. He would take me around to his friends and say, "This is my boy. Here he's bouncing down there at that bar. You've got to be 21 to get in the door." He's 17. They don't know that. Don't tell anybody. But the owner knew. Not only was I bouncing at this bar, but my whole life started to slip rapidly downhill at that point. It was definitely here that I know now that I lost touch with my Creator. I get it cognitively of when it happened almost. What happened was that I allowed Satan to use one of the greatest gifts that God had given me, this sharp, beautiful, analytical mind, and turn it against God. Instead of it being a testimony for God, it became His enemy. I started to question and defy any authority over me. I plainly saw that man's laws were corrupt. It was easy for me to understand. Everything that man was doing when I would look at the laws screamed hypocrisy to me. Cigarettes were legal if you were 18. They even went to great lengths to tell you that they were safe and they were okay. Well, we know what a lie that is. Now they even put a warning label that no longer says may cause cancer. It says it will cause cancer. It's a poison. We know that. But boy, did they lie to us back then. Not only then were they lying about cigarettes killing millions of people, but as a student nurse, I was taught the procedure of partial birth abortion, on how we actually allowed the baby to start to be born, and the nurse had to cover the baby's mouth and nose as the head was presented so it doesn't take a breath. Because if the baby breathes, it's murder. So the nurse holds the baby's head in and doesn't let it breathe, while the doctor fills the brain with saline and kills the baby. And then we let it be born normally, simply so we can harvest the stem cells. Evidently Superman needed them to get his back fixed or something, but it was all out there. The science was happening. And I looked at all this stuff going on and I said, are you kidding me? This is the laws I'm supposed to follow? In my early years in nursing school, they taught us in my psych portion that homosexuality was wrong, not morally, but naturally. That it simply was unnatural, and homosexuals had a diagnosed mental disorder, a DSM number for it. That's how I was taught in the beginning of my nursing career. You know, now that's completely changed, and it's exactly the opposite now. Homosexuality is no longer classified under the American Psychiatric Association nor the AMA as a mental disorder. Guess what is? The opposite. Homophobia. Saying it's wrong. Not being able to accept it. Now that's the mental illness. Man, I knew that this was all wrong. I knew that these people didn't know what they were doing. I knew they were just making up the laws corruptly as they wanted to. And I was sure of one thing. I didn't have to follow them anymore. I was going to be able to use my mind and figure out what God wanted me to do and not have to follow man's law, my daddy's law, or anything else. This is what I'd convinced myself of. You know, I finally decided that the way that I needed to handle this was that I would just simply use my mind to discern good from evil. And God would speak to me and tell me what it was. And that would carry me through my life. What it carried me through was 3 addictions. The first addiction that I had and started at this time was marijuana, was pot. Now what I told myself in my logical mind was, the government says marijuana is bad. Medically, I've got a lot of information that says it's good. So what scripturally do I go with? Well, I prayed about it, I thought about it, and God, I thought, said to me, Tim, all things with moderation, except from the tree of good and evil. You're not allowed to take from the tree of good and evil. So we've got Adam and Eve thrown out of the garden. So I said, well, you know what? I never have seen anybody smoke a joint and all of a sudden decide they were naked and run and hide from God. So I think I'm okay with pot. Well, even if that was okay, and it wasn't, the key was all things with moderation, whether you want to argue about alcohol, marijuana, or anything else. And from the moment I started smoking, I never used it moderately. I smoked every day of my life for the past 25 years. I would smoke at work when no one knew it. I would smoke at home. It was something that brought me peace and that I thought was all right. The second addiction that entered my life was at the same time because my body started to fall apart. And my doctors prescribed hydrocodone or Vicodin or Loratab. Now I never, ever, ever abused this. I never snorted it. I never shot it. I never rubbed it into my belly button. I only took it as prescribed. And I never took more than prescribed. So I don't see the problem with that. Well, God had a problem with it, and we talked about it here a couple of weeks ago. And I'm going to share that with you. Oh, my third addiction, it's more decadent than a sin, but I'm addicted to pumpkin spice creamer. So pray for me. All right, after all this stuff was going on, though, I really started to believe that I was walking right. I knew what I was doing. I thought that God was using me in miraculous ways, and He was. As a fireman paramedic, I'm not even going to begin to tell you the countless lives that God saved through me in the back of that ambulance or on the job. I'm not even going to explain the young guys that were petrified and scared to death, but followed me into that burning building when it was so dangerous and so on fire, even the cockroaches and the rats were running out. And I needed these guys to run in. It's hard to convince smart guys to run into that building while it's really falling down around their ears. But God used me in miraculous ways in spite of my sin and the derailment of my life. So I thought I was probably doing all right. I'm on the right track. Look at the product of my life. I'm doing okay. What had really happened, though, was that I no longer could tell God's voice from the father of lies. Satan had silently and quietly slipped right in to this kid that was on the quiz teams, that was going to theological school, and thought that he knew exactly where his father wanted him to go. And replaced my father's voice. And I bought into it. In my mind, I analytically started to think about everything, and I bought into exactly what Satan was telling me. Clueless that he was the one running my life. Clueless that even though God was still doing miraculous things in my life, that's not who I was answering to. I used to tell young paramedics, look, you guys, you haven't got to worry when you're in the back of that truck and the person is dying on you. You haven't got to worry because you're not in charge. I'm telling you as a Christian, God is in charge of who lives and who dies. I have seen paramedics in the back of a truck do absolutely everything right, the right drug at the right time, at the right modality, absolutely on top of it, airway, taking care of business, and the patient still dies. I've seen the opposite. I've seen some guys that shouldn't be carrying my stethoscope mess it up so bad in the back of that truck, there is no way this person should survive. And even if they don't survive the reason they're in the back of my truck, this dumb paramedic's killing them. And they don't die. And I would use that to teach newer paramedics, you're not in charge. Calm down. Just do your job. God decides who lives or dies. It was also something, though, that Satan had conned me into understanding because it kept me distanced from those as they passed and as they died. Those that were reaching out at the last minute to ask me what I thought they were getting ready to face. It was still Satan I was listening to. And I understand that. I really do. You know, what I didn't know was that not only was Satan using everything that I did against me, God was battling to use everything that me and Satan did for his own glory, for his own self. And it was working, I just couldn't see it. You know, the greatest trick of the devil is to convince the world that he doesn't exist. That's his greatest trick. His second greatest trick, though, is to convince the willing that his rhetoric is from God and that this is the path that we should take. That's his second greatest trick, and that's what he did with me. It was this confusion and this arrogance that my sin caused those 4 deaths that we're not going to talk about today. But that's how they happened. It was in this mindset in the 70s that I joined the Kingsman Motorcycle Club. Now, you need to understand that my family in the 50s started this motorcycle club. But they started it as a blue-collar, riding and racing motorcycle club, and everybody in this town worked for General Motors or a General Motors supportive service. So these guys would ride and race on weeknights and weekdays and then party on the weekends. But they were good, hard-working fellas. This club then transitioned through the 60s into the 70s when I joined it and slowly became what the government now calls an OMG, an outlaw motorcycle gang. Now, we didn't mind that too much because you got to understand that in the 70s and the 80s, the word outlaw meant something different than it did to you folks that were raised maybe in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s. Everything now was being used the word outlaw, and it was all right. There was outlaw country music. Outlaws like Waylon and Willie were not really breaking laws. They were just not following society's rules. They were rebels. So we didn't care that they were calling us outlaws. That progressed then into the 80s and the 90s was the word gangster. And then that became popular. And me and my club embraced that. The Sopranos came out. A TV show called Sons of Anarchy came out. And all of a sudden we're all proud to be gangsters. There's gangster rap, gangster country. Everybody seemed to throw the word around and there was no accountability for it. So it didn't bother us that the club was transitioning into what the government said was an outlaw motorcycle gang. Didn't matter to us. All we knew is that we were the same group of guys looking for what everybody in the world's looking for. Love and non-judgmental brotherhood. I used to tell the guys in the club, this club takes everything from devil worshippers to born-again Christians. We'll take all of them because we don't judge. It's between you and God. What we do is require that you love your brother, you back your brother up, you don't steal or lie from your brother, you treat him the way you want to be treated. And that was our mantra. So we didn't care what the government or anybody else thought. Unfortunately, it was at this time that we started to have trouble with one of the largest motorcycle clubs in the United States and now in the world. We started not getting along with them, and as this club decided that we don't wear a little thing on our vest that said 1 percenter. And if you don't wear this patch that says 1 percenter, these other clubs, these big national Hells Angels and Pagans and Outlaws and all these other big clubs, they decide that what that means is that they can tax you. The government can't do anything about it. They're allowed to tell you, you need to wear my support patch on your vest if you're in my area, and you're going to pay a tax per man. Well, me and my guys weren't going to do that. Matter of fact, I started to encourage my guys to stand up to these people. A lot of us were veterans. We'd gone and fought to be free here in America. And by gosh, we weren't going to bow down to a group of thugs or anybody else that told us you pay us money or you're not allowed to wear your patches. So we stood up to them. Government was watching all the time, paying attention all the time. As this progressed, it got ugly. At one point, they kidnapped 5 of my guys and burnt their patches. Here just 6 months ago, they put one of my guys on his knees in Leesburg and killed him because he wouldn't take his vet stuff. Good guy. Guy that never done anything wrong, never been arrested, worked for the city, just liked to ride, wear his patches, hang out with his guys. He simply went up to the store to get cigars. This other group was laying in wait and had been hiding. Pulled him off his bike. Gave him one chance. Take those patches off right now, and then go back and tell the rest of the boys they're going to be wearing our support patch, or we're going to kill you. He grabbed his vest and tightened it around his body as they drove him to his knees and murdered him. All on video. That's the kind of way we were rolling. So 2 years ago, this is important, our national president's name's David Perk. David sees that 2 guys, which are members of our club, but they're called nomads. Now the nomads inside our club is kind of like the special forces of the club. A lot of the guys couldn't do some of the heavy lifting, or weren't as confrontational, or didn't carry a weapon. So the nomads was a group of guys that stood up for the weaker members of the club. The national president was a nomad, David Perk. It's what David used when he wanted someone to do some dirty work. And it got to be a problem with me and David, me and Hartz. So he threw us out. Then he would ask us to come back as he would have trouble with these other clubs. And things would quiet down, and then we'd start handing out crosses again, and he'd throw us out again. But 2 years ago, 2 guys that were nomads decided they didn't want to play with the Kingsmen Club anymore, and they were going to join this other organization. They were going to join this other gang. So they did. They left the Kingsmen and joined this other group. That freaked David out. That flipped him right out. He was losing his mind over it. We didn't know at the time that, of course, Satan was working really hard with David Perk and really had him in a grips. But I'd known David 40 years. I had never seen David Perk commit a crime. I had never seen him drunk. I'd never seen him use drugs. So as David come to me and said, I'm so mad about these two guys that joined this other club, we're going to do something about it. I didn't pay much attention. He's just running his mouth. I get it. His feelings are hurt. He's the national boss, and two of our best nomads just joined this other club. But then, David takes off to New York with a brand new guy in the club named Little Bear. He'd only been in the club 8 months. Little Bear wanted to be a nomad really bad under me and Hearts. But in our club, you had to have 8 years in the club to be a nomad. Because you had to have experience, you had to know what you were doing. We don't want new guys doing this. So you had to be in the club a while. This guy's only been in the club 8 months. For some reason, which we couldn't figure out, David Perk takes Little Bear up to New York. What occurred was, Little Bear got in the back seat with two nomads that are still in the club and shot them both in the back of the head. Wow. I couldn't believe that. I mean, we went to Perk, the boss, and we said, what just happened? He says, I think it was that other group, man. I think they murdered two of our nomads. Wow, really? Yeah. Oh, no, wait. It was a drug deal that went bad. We got video of guys in hoodies. They were all in the car doing drugs, and that's what happened. Oh, wow. Well, what were you doing with Little Bear? He's only got 8 months in the club. Why was he up there with you? You don't need to worry about that. Little Bear's fine. Oh, and by the way, Tim, since you're the national president of the Nomads, I want you to make Little Bear a nomad. What? Are you kidding me? He's got 8 months. Oh. Hey, is Little Bear involved in these murders? No. Well, Little Bear, not the coldest can of pop in the refrigerator. He goes into one of the clubhouses and sees some girl that he likes. She belongs to another member of the Kingsmen. But he says to Perk, I want her. Perk says, you can have her, take her. So he tells her, get out and get on the back of my bike. And this other member didn't like that at all. He just started brewing about it. Then, after he commits the murders, Little Bear takes this girl that he picked up in the clubhouse with him while he disposes of the gun. Then, when she and her ex-boyfriend tell the police, hey, we think this guy had something to do with killing those two Kingsmen, and they arrest Little Bear, he refuses to give it up. He won't tell them that he did it. He won't tell them that David Perk ordered it. He won't even talk about it. So they arrest him, and they put him in jail. Well, it wasn't long before he started running his mouth to other gang members in jail, and they immediately sold him out. Hey, he said he did it. He said David Perk ordered it. He said that he did it because these two guys that were in the club were getting ready to join the other two guys in this other gang. And David had him murdered as an example. Wow, that blew us all away. We didn't believe that. We went to Perk. He said it's not true. But they went ahead and arrested Little Bear and took him to trial. And 2 years ago, they convicted him of the murder of these two Kingsmen. Thought it was over, but it wasn't. A year later, which is now last year, they arrest 17 Kingsmen, including David Perk, the national boss, and charge all of them with the murder of these two Kingsmen. They say under RICO that it's conspiracy. You guys are a criminal organization. We can prove you're a criminal organization by a whole lot of stuff Tim Haley wrote on Facebook, where he says, hey, you guys, we're as much of a criminal organization as these other clowns. We're as much of an outlaw motorcycle gang as these other clowns. We don't have to listen to what these other clowns are telling us. We can stand up to them. The government used all this and put it together and arrested all 17 of these guys. But they didn't arrest me. I didn't do anything. One day I come home, though, and the FBI is standing at my door a year ago. They said, hey, Tim, we want to talk to you, man. We want to talk to you about these murders. I made it really clear to the FBI, now David had been arrested, Little Bear had been convicted, and the rest of the club was incensed about it. And I told the FBI, hey, look, man, you guys want some information about this or whatever? The whole club is against what happened. None of us wanted these two brothers to be murdered. Now, these two guys that got killed, they weren't great guys. It doesn't matter. They were fathers, they were sons, they were God's children, and they were murdered sitting in a car with a guy that they trusted sitting in the back seat. So I told the FBI this, and I said, not only that, but I identify as a blue family. My son was killed on the job. My daughter and her husband spent 20 years in the military as military police officers. My son-in-law still serves with Ocala PD. My father was a retired deputy sheriff. He never went back to the pulpit, but when he left the Gambinos and the crime stuff, he ended up coming to Orlando when he ran away from my mom, found a new woman, and became a deputy sheriff and retired from the Orange County Sheriff's Department. My family's a blue family, you guys. What do you need to know? The FBI took all that in. They said, well, Tim, listen, we want you to know you're not a target of this indictment. We don't think that you've done anything wrong. We appreciate you talking to us. Well, they were lying. They weren't being honest. As a matter of fact, while they were sitting in my living room talking to me, they knew that I'd already been indicted. It was just sealed. They just didn't bother to mention it because they wanted to talk to me. Now that brings me to what happened, y'all. You need to pay attention to what actually occurred just 4 weeks ago. I get a phone call from a friend of mine, actually the chief of police. He says, Tim, what are you doing today? You going skydiving? I says, yeah, I might get a jump in here next week. He said, yeah, me and you got to get together and do some jumping. But before you do that, listen, do me a favor. The FBI wants to talk to you again. Oh, okay. Because they want you to come down to their office. All right, I will. He says, can I call and tell them you're leaving right now? I said, sure. Off I go. I thought it was odd when I pulled out the end of my driveway that I saw a vehicle that said so-and-so's Realty on the right-hand side and another one that said so-and-so's Realty on the left-hand side, and obviously two agents sitting in each car trying to pretend that they weren't cops. I thought, if they just want to talk to me, why is there FBI at the end of my driveway acting like they're doing something else? But no warning bells went off. I drove on over there. I go in, I sit down with the FBI, and they say, Tim, we're arresting you for murder. What? We're charging you with RICO violations. We're charging you with being a criminal boss in this organization. We're charging you with the responsibility of those two guys that were dead. We're going to put you in prison for the rest of your life. This is federal. And even though we've charged you with 4 or 5 things, if you get a hotshot lawyer and you get everything thrown out but one charge, you get the same life sentence. It's mandatory sentencing. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Man, was I upset and ticked off. You guys, all you had to do was come and talk to me. Why would you arrest me? You know I didn't do anything. Something doesn't make sense here. If you just wanted to talk to me, you could have knocked on the door like you did the last time. I was so overwhelmed as they took me into my prison cell that I couldn't even think straight. All I knew is that my life had ended at this point, and these guys were going to put me in prison for, they said, 35 years. Oh, I'm 63. The math ain't hard. The rest of my life. Not only that, they were going to wipe out all of the finances that my wife and I had worked so hard to stockpile for our babies and our grandchildren. It was all going to disappear. And then I was still going to go to prison for the rest of my life. I'm telling you folks, I have never in my life been as broken as that. I have never in my life been as dark as that. I couldn't walk 3 feet without just crawling to my knees and crying. I was so devastated by what had just occurred. And I couldn't see any logic or any reasoning behind it. I prayed to God and I cried out to him. I said, what's the matter? What happened? All you had to do was talk to me, God. What happened with the FBI? I don't understand any of this. God wouldn't answer me. Wouldn't talk to me. Satan still did a lot of talking. But I caught on real quick who I'd been listening to. I clearly understood for the first time in years whose voice I'd been listening to, that I had mistaken for my father's. I tell you, it really got bad, and I didn't know what to do. And I just started to cry every day. This is only 4 weeks ago. And I was devastated. So God finally speaks to me. He says, you ready to listen? I said, yeah, boy, am I ready to listen. Hey, God, I get this. Oh, you wanted to redeem me, right? I said, man, you didn't have to do this. You could have just had the FBI come talk to me. We could have taken care of this. He says, no, Tim, no. See, if I'd have just let you go talk to the FBI without being arrested, you'd have been restored legally. You'd have beat the charge. They wouldn't have arrested you. You'd have been restored legally. He said, this isn't about you anymore. I need to restore you spiritually. I need to restore you to your family. I need to restore you to me. And we're going to do it through this. And I said, well, whoo. All you had to do was knock, God. He said, I've been knocking for 25 years. Boy, you just ain't been paying attention. So we started down this path just 4 weeks ago, me and God. Now, of course, because Tim Haley is sharp and thinks he knows what's going on, I said, okay, God, I got it, I understand. You're not going to make me go to prison, right? Okay, but you probably want me to go tell people about this. What are we going to do? Get a big stage, spotlights, head up some gang colors, start telling folks about it? God says, I didn't say any of that. I said, well, then what's going on? He said, for all you know, you're going to have a massive heart attack in 3 days and die. And I needed to make sure I gave one last effort to someone I loved as much as I loved you to be redeemed. I said, I don't want to go tell my wife that. I might die in 3 days. He said, anybody you meet, that day their soul may be required of them. Nobody knows but me. I said, okay, then do you want me to go tell people? He says, no, I'll tell you when you need to talk about it. He says, what we're going to do now, Tim, is we're going to take who you've been your whole life, and I'm going to show you how much I love you. Your whole life, even though you haven't said it out loud, has always been about, I'm not sure God exists. I'm not 100% positive He's real. I believed it, but there was always doubts. So I was a guy that was constantly asking God for signs. Give me a sign here. Give me a sign there. Let me know. Now, a lot of other Christians would tell me all the time, oh, Tim, that's wrong. Tempt not the Lord thy God. And I'd tell them, you people don't even know what you're talking about. God is all about signs. Unto you was born this day in the city of David. Let this be a sign unto you. Jesus told everybody, hey, if you don't believe in what I do and what I say, at least believe in the signs and the miracles I'm showing you. Believe in that. The fleece that He turned wet on one side and dry on the other. It's always been about signs with God. So I had no trouble asking God for signs. What He told me was, though, since you're a high-energy testosterone kind of guy that likes this kind of stuff, He says, I love you so much, I'm going to take you on the ride of your life. We're going to do this together, and at the end, I am going to restore you and save you and your family, and it's going to be good. I said, oh, wow. Thanks, God. I'm glad I don't have to go to prison. He said, I didn't say that. He said, don't you remember the third sinner on the cross, Tim? Yeah. At the last minute, you saved him. He said, yeah, but he still died on the cross for his sins, didn't he? Oh, yeah. He said, I didn't tell you you're not going to prison. I'm telling you that now if you're willing to go where I lead you, I, your God, may need to go to prison. And I may need to take your butt with me. Oh, I don't want to go. All right, but I will. All right, if that's what we're into, I will. God says, so you want to play the sign game? I am going to overwhelm you with signs in the next 2 weeks. Before you speak to anybody or tell anybody about this, I need to overwhelmingly convince you for the last time in your life of my existence and my power. I said, okay. And he said, but the key to this is to know that no matter what happens and how it looks, I got you in the end, and we're going to be okay. So I said, does that mean I'm not going to prison? He said, I never told you that. Stop saying it. Just let me lead and you follow. And I said, okay, I will. So what I'm going to share with you now is just quickly the signs that He overwhelmed me with in just this 2-week period. And part of what you've got to understand is that this stuff happened 2 and 3 times a day, all within 2 weeks, not over years or months. So it overwhelmingly convinced me, finally, of my God's existence, of His love for me, of His power in my life. The very first sign that He pointed out to me was, my arrest didn't go the way anybody else's arrest went. Every other member of this gang that's been arrested got arrested at 3 in the morning with shock grenades as they kicked in their doors, shot their dogs, and dragged them out of bed. I got a phone call. Hey, you want to come in now? We want to talk to you. My arrest didn't happen the way anybody else's did. When we got into court, the government said to the judge, not a single member of this gang has been released. We still have cooperating witnesses inside their club. This guy is the national boss of the tough guys in the club. He has to be detained. They've all been detained. We are demanding you detain him. The judge called my wife up and said, hey, if he tries to beat town, will you tell us? My wife said, absolutely. He goes, I'm going to release him. The government wheeled, I wheeled. The lawyer that they sent me just stood up shaking his head. And the judge says, I'm going to release him. The lawyer that didn't even believe that or understand it. So the federal prosecutor says again, Your Honor, you understand that this is not us here in Ocala asking this. These are the feds in New York demanding that you detain him. The judge says, I got it. I'm releasing him. I couldn't believe it. And God said, I'm going to show you some signs. So at this point, I say back to God, What? Yeah, I get it now, God. There's going to be ups and downs like a roller coaster, but you're going to take me through this in the end. God said, I never said that. It's the opposite. There's not going to be ups and downs. It's going to be one fast, downhill, smooth ride, and you're going to undeniably have to give me all the credit. Satan wants you to think there's going to be ups and downs because that's your carnal mind trying to work again. Satan's going to try and convince you that maybe now you need to get out there and start to balance the scale, start doing stuff. Maybe if you can weigh it out enough, maybe I'll let you slide on this. Because none of that's going on, Tim. This has to be 100% you just begging me for my forgiveness and me showing you I love you. And I'm going to do it with these signs over the next 2 weeks. And you're not to tell anybody about it until we're done. So we started to roll on. You know, there was no money for a defense lawyer. I called these guys up, and first of all the lawyers had been taken. Everybody else got arrested a year ago. It's all up in Buffalo, but all the good guys had been taken or already assigned. So the first thing that God did when I just couldn't even come up with the money was, He said, call your daughter Amy, the one that's in the Navy, that's overseas in Japan with her husband. Just call him and ask him. I did. I called my daughter. She said, yeah, Dad, we're going to send you some money. I said, okay, how much? She said, Josh, that's my son-in-law, he's going to call you and talk to you. Man, I didn't want to have that conversation. Here I was getting ready to tap into whatever money this poor kid had to cover the sins that I'd been living. Josh calls me up, and he's crying. He says, you know, Dad, my father died a year ago. I said, yeah, I remember, son, I remember. He says, it was terrible, dark for me. I kept crying out to God, why is my father dead? Why? He was young. He was only 58 or 59. Why is my dad dead? And he said, he left me some money. But I don't care about the money. I didn't want the money. I wanted my dad back. He says, I know today. And as he's crying, he says, God took my dad a year ago so I could save my dad today. And we're giving you all the money for the lawyer. I said, wow. Holy cow. Really? Yeah, absolutely. And God said again, are you paying attention, Tim? Yes, Father, you've got my attention now. I got the money for the lawyer and I didn't know who to give it to. So I thought, okay, you got to find a Christian lawyer. Make sure you don't give this to a heathen or a pagan. So I started to ask the lawyers as I would poll them, are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? Not a single one. One guy I ended up with, tells me, oh, I believe in a higher power. I do, but probably not the same God you believe in. Man, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to waste this money. I didn't want to mess up and be listening to Satan. I certainly didn't want to get some heathen in there representing me. I needed someone that knew God was real and could see what He had done for me and changed my life and was able to use that. I went over crying to my mother-in-law, the old prayer warrior. Walked in, she's got TBN going and blaring. Turn it down, Ma, I want to talk to you. I gave her the story and I said, I don't know what to do. I've got this money now and I want to hire a Christian lawyer. And I know that God sometimes uses non-Christians like, doctors and stuff, but this is important, Ma. I don't think this is the right thing. She said, let me tell you a story. I'm thinking, oh, geez, I hope it relates to what we're talking about. She says, I had to go to Jacksonville one time. It was foggy. It was early in the morning. It was rainy. As I'm coming out of Jacksonville, I get lost. Can't find my way home. I'm praying to God. God, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. I'm something. All of a sudden, this big semi-truck pulls in front of me, and all I can see is its lights in front of me. So I start following it. I believe God was leading me there. Don't know where this truck was taking me or going, but it turns out it went from 95 to 295, and then from 295 back to 95, and then on the I-10, and the truck took me right on up to 301, almost to home. I said, wow, that's a great story, Ma. She says, yes, I passed it. It was a beer truck. Oh, the story does relate. As a matter of fact, that's one of the signs God wants me to be paying attention to, because it's all happening fast within 2 weeks. I had to go up to New York. I had to meet with this federal prosecutor that's trying to lock me up for the rest of my life. As I get my rental car, the guy says, hey, you want that Cyrus radio? I said, I don't want any radio. He says, oh, okay, no problem. I get in the car, and not only is there a radio, but it's locked onto a Christian station, blaring the minute I turn the key on. Now, that may not amuse you, but I took it as a sign. The whole time that I was in New York for 3 days, that radio station fed me. Every minute, every day, I got something from it. And I had God telling me at that same time, write it down, boy. It's a sign. Okay, God, I got it. I'm laying in the hotel room. God says, are you cognitive of the fact that every other member of your club is in prison right now and has been for 2 years? And you're laying in a comfortable hotel bed, charged with the same murders that they've been charged with? I didn't think about it, but yeah, I get it now, God. It's one of the signs I'm showing you, Tim. All happening right now within just a couple of days, just piling on me. God spoke to me and said, listen, I need you to call a friend of yours. He's having a problem. I said, God, I'm having trouble too here. I need you to call this guy. Well, why? What's going on, God? A friend of mine calls and tells me that this brother of mine in another city, he's a fire chief. He'd been arrested for DWI. Man, when you're charged with 2 murders, DWI doesn't seem like a big deal, you know. I just didn't understand calling this guy. But I did. Called him up. Me and Hartz went to see him. God says, I want you to tell this guy 2 things. And make sure you don't put any Tim Haley on it. Don't think about it. Don't put your spin. Don't think what you think I want you to say. Just tell this guy 2 things. I said, okay, what is it? He says, you tell this guy that I love him and his wife with all my heart. And it's broken for him. I said, okay. And he says, and second, you tell this guy that I have got a plan for his life and his wife. And this was never it. I said, just that? He goes, just that. So I did. Going to see the guy in his bar that he owns now. He's still the fire chief. He also owns a bar. He's not there. So we leave the letter that had just those 2 statements on it. God wanted me to tell you these 2 things. 4 hours later, this guy calls me up. I was going to blow my brains out today, Tim, he says. I said, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, today's the day. I was going to do it, man. I'm as suicidal as I've ever been in my life. I said, well, why? You got a DWI. What's the deal? He says, no, man, my life's over. I've resigned as fire chief. I'm selling the bar. I've embarrassed my wife. It's over. It's dark. And I don't believe in the same God you believe in. I don't believe in God. I said, you know, brother, I remember that now that you don't believe in God. It seems to me, though, you believe in the devil. He says, I do. I believe in evil, but I don't believe in good. I said, man, how can you buy in to that there is a Satan but not a God? Don't you know that my God is even accountable for the creation of Satan and giving him free will? He knows that. He knew what was going to happen. He did it anyway. Why would he do that? Why would he give us free will, give the devil and the angels free will at the same time and then say he loves us? It didn't make sense to me. Didn't make sense to my brother either. What did make sense was that for all these years I've also been working as a psych nurse in the Marion County Jail. And I'm their suicide guy. I'm the guy that when someone says they're going to do it, that they send me down to evaluate to see, because I've got not only the psychological training, but the street smarts. Tim, tell us if this guy's playing the system or if he's truly going to hurt himself. I didn't understand suicide. I thought I did. I was an expert in it. I taught classes in it. I wrote some pamphlets on it. I've been published in it. I knew all about suicide. The day that I was arrested, I understood suicide clearer than anything else in my life. I understood the overwhelming darkness and the devastation that Satan lays on someone's heart where there's just absolutely no out. And I finally understood where my friend was coming from. He said, you know, I'm not going to do it. Talking to you now, I don't believe in the God you're talking about, but I'm not going to do it. Matter of fact, we'd like to get together with you and Dawn down the road and see how this goes. I thought, oh, God's going to use this to maybe help him. He's going to watch and see how it goes. That's when I went back crying to God and said, I'm glad this is happening, but Father, I still don't get why you had to let this happen this way to me. He says, you're still not paying attention. I am going to use what has occurred here because, first of all, I allowed it to happen. There are some people that say God doesn't do bad things. He only is responsible for the good things. You're wrong. I'm not going to argue with you, but you're wrong. Satan had to come to God and beg him to attack Job. God had to give permission for Satan to attack Job. Nothing happens without God's permission or his will. So I went back to him with that and said, hey, why did you let all this stuff happen to me? What's going on? He says again, you have no idea the lives that are going to change over this. I'm going to be using this event to change prosecutors, judges, prison guards, gang members. You have no idea what's going on here. I said, okay. Am I going to jail? He said, absolutely, probably. I don't know. We'll see. I didn't know what to do. I'm still not getting what I thought I needed from God, but I no longer am petrified. I no longer have the spirit of fear. I no longer am so broken and devastated I can't get up off the ground. I'm now marching on this path where he said, do you remember the 13-year-old boy that took his Bible to school every day? The only reason nobody bothered you was because you were a black belt. Other than that, behind your back, they were laughing that you took this Bible to school every day. That's the Timothy I'm looking for. And until he comes back to me, I just want you to be quiet and follow. I said, I don't mind calling some people up. He said, I didn't tell you to do that. He goes, I've got a 10-month-old Doberman. And he thinks he's 5 years old. And when he wants to bark at something, he'll run behind my back, stick his face out, and then bark like a big dog. God says, that's me and you right now, Tim. And because of that, I don't even want you taking your Vicodin anymore. I said, oh, no, wait a minute. I gave up the pot when you told me 2 weeks ago, God. I'll never smoke again. I got it. I didn't use it in moderation. It's wrong. Whatever you want to say. But the doctors give me this, and I hurt, Father. I hurt in every joint and every bone in my body. And all he said was, look, either my grace is sufficient for you or it's not. You can take the Vicodin. Go ahead. But if you take the Vicodin and now you don't have any pain, we may not talk for 8 or 9 hours. But if I bring pain back to you every time and you just simply pray to me, I'll alleviate your pain. Boy, I wrote that down because it was true. It didn't matter how bad I hurt. Wake up out of a sound sleep. I would say, okay, God, here I am. And I would get a warm feeling and the pain would leave my body. I mean, completely. And I could go back to bed. Now, I may wake up an hour later and be in pain again. And God said, see, that's me and you, that dog. I'm keeping you close to me. You know, Joyce Meyer said, sit, walk, run. God says, you're still sitting. I don't want you out there on your own. Even though you think you know what you're doing, I just want you to be quiet and let me be God. I said, okay. Okay. I'm driving to the airport to go see these guys. And this brand new giant billboard appears alongside the road. I've been down to this airport a bunch of times. And it said, who is Jesus? I said, man, that sign wasn't there 2 weeks ago. I was just up here. Again, it's asking me who is Jesus, and I have to answer accurately. Do I know now? I was able to say, yeah, I know who Jesus is. I got it. My first appearance with this federal prosecutor is he tried to put me in prison. They said, sit over here at the defense table. The other guy's over there. There was 2 federal marshals, Homeland Security, the FBI, and 2 federal prosecutors. Then there was me sitting at this table all alone. The judge says, where's his lawyer? I thought we assigned one. They said, well, we did, but he's tied up in another court. The judge says, well, he can't sit there alone, so what are we going to do? The federal prosecutor jumps up and says, hey, how about if I plead for him? We'll just plead him not guilty. The judge says, you all right with that, Tim? I don't want you sitting there all alone. I looked over, saw Jesus sitting in that seat, looked back, said, I'm not alone. I'm all right, let's go on. They couldn't see it, but I could see I wasn't alone. I knew what was going on. I was back on track. I understood. Even little things like the stock that we'd been losing financially all of a sudden started to gain money. I really started to understand what God had planned for me and what He wanted. It was little things like, I would say signs, and me and Abba used to play this thing when I was younger. Show me that you're here right now. Shake something for me. Shake a tree. Now, it had to be that it was supernatural. It couldn't be a windy day. Nothing else could move. If God was going to show me that He was there and real for me, He shook just the tree that I was standing in front of while everything else stood dead still. He reminded me of that. And within this 2 or 3 day period, started to shake a bush or a tree or a flag while everything else had dead still, and overwhelmed my spirit with His presence. And I took it as one of those signs and I wrote it down. I opened up my Bible randomly, crying, didn't know what to do, and right away it opened up to Matthew 6:25. And I looked, and there was my old Bible with a bunch of handwritten notes about not being afraid and forgiveness. As I left my lawyer's office, we walked out to the rental car. And he goes, well, I'm sure you got a parking ticket. They're pretty tight up here, and you only pay for an hour, and you've been in here 2.5 hours. As we walk to the rental car, we see the ticket, envelope on the ground. The lawyer goes, I knew they got you. He picks it up. It's empty. It was an old one, and there's no ticket on my car. I said to my lawyer, God just did that. He goes, well, I don't know about that, but it's interesting. The day was so dark, there was absolutely no sun and none predicted. Again, we're in western New York. It was just 2 weeks ago. I thought it was going to snow. Florida boy. The lawyer says there ain't going to be no sun today. As he said that, the sun broke out and shined so brightly, he said, isn't that odd? I said, no, that's my father. He just did that for me. Showing me a little sunlight. The lawyer just shook his head. I was sitting in my office, and I'm crying. God, can you hear me? I don't think my voice is getting past this doggone ceiling. I just don't. I looked up and there was a bright light crack, looked like in my ceiling. Now, I'm science educated. I recognized right away it's just the sun reflecting off my blinds. I didn't understand the jagged pattern to it like a lightning bolt, but I knew it was just from the blinds. And as I started to verbalize that back to God, for a minute I thought it moved over me. Never seen the sun move that fast. I've been sitting in this office for 20 years. I've never seen this light before in my life. And there it was. And it had cracked open, and I thought in my mind, in my spirit, that I was getting a glimpse of heaven in the blue sky through that roof. He validated for me right then and there. I'm here, and we're going to be all right in this. And I wrote it down. It was another one of those signs. I was looking for comfort as I cried and opened up my Bible. I wanted to go to Psalms 27. So I turned to it and I started to realize that I'd made an error. I was reading Psalms 127. Then as I started to read it, I found 127 verse 2. And I decided to claim that. So I go back then to Psalms 27, and again I'm reading the wrong one. I'm in Psalms 26. I just can't seem to get it right. And yet every one of those Psalms spoke to my heart about the situation I was in, even though I never found the Psalm that I thought I was looking to read. And again, I wrote it down as a sign. I can tell you that the greatest sign, though, the greatest and most remarkable thing that he did was on my son's birthday. My oldest and my youngest and I had been bumping heads for years. We didn't get along. There was some stuff happening. I wasn't happy. They weren't happy. I had decided early in my life that my father was such a phony and such a hypocrite, I was never going to let that happen to me or my children. I was going to be up front with my children. I was going to let them know exactly who I was. They were going to see the good side, the bad side of me, and everything else. I said to God, hey, what's up with this? You said you're going to restore my children. What was happening? He says, well, Tim, you and I have always been a bargaining kind of thing. And he says, I've honored every bargain we've ever made, haven't I? I said, yes, Father, you have. He says, you've broken every one we've ever made, haven't you? Yes. Yes, I have. He says, well, your relationship with your children is me honoring your bargain. I don't even get what you're talking about, God. He says, well, how do you pray? Well, I start with the Lord's Prayer, and then I pray what I want to. He says, when you get to the part about forgive me for my sins, the way I forgive those that sin against me, how do you feel about that? Well, yeah, that's what I want. I pray that, I believe it. He goes, well, I've been honoring it. I didn't understand. I said, my son started messing up, I think, when he was very young, 8, 9. What are you talking about, God? God says, yeah. Before his age of accountability. You're talking about your sin, your phoniness, your double standard, just like your dad's, corrupted your children's lives. They saw right through it just because you were upfront about it. Didn't change it. It didn't change that you etched into their lives that they could make their own rules, that they could follow their own logic, that you could do whatever they thought was right. I really had trouble with that. But God said, call your son, tell your daughter that you're done judging them. Never again until the day you die will you judge any of their sin. Because from now on, anything that you think is sin in their life is between me and them and the Holy Spirit. Not you anymore. You've given up your right to judge your children. You corrupted them. Your failed life led them down this path. Your epic failures and derailment caused everything that's going on, and you don't even think you're accountable. Wow. Okay, I get it, God. He said, now call your boy and get him over here and give him his birthday cards and tell him how much you love him. Get hold of your daughter, tell her how much you love her, and tell him you're done with Satan's nonsense about judging him. I said, okay. I did. And it was wonderful. And it was beautiful. And it was everything you'd hope it would be. And as my son left, him and I crying, phone's ringing. I pick it up. It's my lawyer. He said, Tim, the oddest thing has just happened. The FBI called. They don't want to put you in prison for the rest of your life anymore. What? He says, yeah. They still want you to go to jail, and you're probably going to go to jail. But not for the rest of your life. Maybe a year, maybe not at all. I said, are you kidding me? This is what I'm getting now from God, is that I'm not going to prison for the rest of my life? Lawyer says, yeah, absolutely. You got to be up here in a week, but we're going to work this all out. Something good's going to happen. You might have to go to jail for a while. The minute I hung up that phone, God spoke clearly and plainly to me. And He said, on the day that your baby boy was born, I gave him life to you. I now give you and your wife's life back to you. There's hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And we're going to be all right through this. Man, I couldn't wait to write that sign down. That was the best. I mean, I absolutely was filled with the Holy Spirit, absolutely telling me that there's no condemnation. I may still end up in jail, but it's going to be willingly. It's going to be because that's where God wants me to be. It's because He needs to be there, and we're going to be all right. But more importantly, my family's going to be all right. My children who are dedicated are going to be all right. My grandbabies are going to be okay. The sin that was causing the failure in my family as the patriarch had been removed, and there was no more condemnation for me under this. You know, I couldn't understand, though, why I needed to share any of this with you people. I just didn't get it. So as I'm driving here yesterday, I'm crying, God, what is the purpose of me having to tell all of these people in my family what a jerk I've been? Just let me start showing them. God says, you still don't get this isn't about you. You still don't understand that you and I are good and this isn't about you. I said, well, give me a sign. What am I here for? What's it about? And if you don't know God's got a sense of humor, you're missing a wonderful God. Because He's got all of our attributes from ego to humor. They're just perfect. And I'm telling you, my God pointed my head to my church sign. And I looked up and it said, my grace is sufficient for any sin. That's why I'm doing this. He goes, it ain't about you. It's about someone that's going to be in the audience. This has nothing to do with you anymore, Tim. You need to tell those people that my grace, if it's sufficient for a failure and a train wreck like you, is sufficient for anything in their life. It doesn't matter. You're to tell them today that this is the altar where it happens. If they need a healing from the great physician, if they need forgiveness from Daddy, if they need love from Abba, if they need redemption from God, if they need saving from Jesus, this is the spot. This is where all the magic happens. This is what it's about today. So I said, okay, God, I got it. I'll go tell them. I saw that sign. It finished everything that I needed to know. I know now the path that I'm on. I know the path that my children are on. And the last thing I've got to say to you folks is, there's a couple of pastors here that'll be glad to pray with you if any of you want to come to this altar this afternoon or this morning. If it's for a healing, if it's for a touch, if it's for redemption, if it's for backsliding, it doesn't matter. Because if you can't grasp the concept of what a train wreck I've been and where He's taken me, then you're missing the message that God meant for you today. Because this day, it may be you that dies from a heart attack in 3 days. This day, it might be you whose soul is required of thee. It's not about me anymore. I'm good. But it's about somebody here today. Listen to what God's trying to tell you, folks. There's something going on in this church. There's something going on with these people. And He's working here. And you're going to miss a blessing. The last thing I'm going to tell you is about the blessing He gave me just the other day and showed me again how I got to stay out of it. I walked home and the federal government was on the phone and they said, Tim, we've decided we want you to take a drug test. I thought, oh no, man, I just quit smoking pot here 3-4 weeks ago. I'm still going to test dirty. I can't take this drug test right now. The federal marshal said, you're to call me back immediately. Right away I started to manipulate it. Okay, listen, it's Friday. I'll call her back Monday. That'll give me 3 more days. Then I realized, you got to pray about it. Stop trying to run things. So I went praying about it. Now I can hear my Father's voice from the father of lies plainly and clearly. And He says, you ain't got to call him. It's okay. It's all right. You can wait till Monday. It's all right. Whatever's going to happen is already in place, and it's not going to change on Monday. But because you're so scared, and because I love you, I want you to go ahead and wait till Monday if you want. But you're going to miss something I wanted to show you. I'm like, oh, okay. Man, I didn't want to pick up that phone, but I did. I called her up and I said, okay, I know you got to come do the home visit and the drug test. She goes, yep. I said, all right. She goes, hey, aren't you getting ready to go to New York? I said, yeah. She said, well, why don't we just do it when you come back in a couple weeks? Whew. Puts me over the window. I ought to be good. God immediately says to me when I hanged up, look at that blessing you'd have missed all weekend long if you waited till Monday. You'd have missed the chance for me to show you right here, right now, that I'm still running this show, not you. And you stepped out on faith, and look how it wasn't going to change on Monday. It wouldn't have changed if you didn't call or did call. It was all going to be the same. But you'd have missed the blessing if you didn't call me right now. I'm telling you, folks, if you don't believe what I'm telling you, just watch the way this journey goes. I'm going up there again next week. We're going to have another meeting. And I don't know what he wants me to tell you or not tell you, but I don't have any problem telling you folks as it occurs down the road. Those of you that are cognitive on the internet want to run home and Google Kingsman MC, you're going to find a whole bunch of terrible stuff said about me and the club on the internet. I don't mind you looking it up. I don't mind if you do it for entertainment purposes or just to validate that God has taken somebody who's that broken and done what He's done with them today. What I am inviting you to do is not miss the signs that He's been showing me and He wants to share with all of you of His existence, of His power, of His love, but most of all, of His redemption. God bless you guys.